Good morning. Looking at weather here, I'm going to start with a brief review of the past week, and it was more of an early fall week here than it was late summer. And typically we don't say that much about our mean temperature departures from normal, which are located here on the right for the past week, but on average across the state we were between 2 and 4 degrees Fahrenheit below the long-term normals, and again, you can see that was the case over much of the upper Midwest. During this time frame, we had a fairly persistent northwesterly flow aloft. We talked about that really the last couple of weeks here, and it definitely, the forecasts panned out fairly much as anticipated. I think the biggest on this particular page we look in the review, probably the biggest impact. There are a couple. One regards moisture, but the other certainly for temperature. If we look at our growing degree day total summation here for the season, beginning on the 1st of May through this last week, we've lost some ground. If we look down here in the lower left, these are departures from the normal across the upper Midwest, including Michigan. And if you remember, test your memory here to think back about the last couple of weeks. But over the middle part of the summer, we actually put some parts of the southern lower back up near or even a couple days ahead of normal. But during the last week, given the cooler than normal temperatures, we have lost some time. So I think that's probably at the top of the list given where things are this season. You can see that the departures from normal get larger as you go north, with, again, fairly close to just slightly behind normal across much of the southern third of the lower. But as you go north, especially into the northern lower and into the upper peninsula, there the departures still are 100 units, base 50 or more behind where they should be. And that's a significant factor, unfortunately, this year, given all the delays. In terms of precipitation, on the upper left here, these are totals during the past week, and just like really the last 2 or more weeks, it really depended on where you were. Rainfall was highly variable, but given that most areas fell further behind normal, and that's especially true across portions of the northern lower as well as portions of eastern lower Michigan here. There was one notable exception here, and we did, with the weather system that went through here at the beginning of the week, we did have some significant rainfall in portions of the upper peninsula, and that was the first significant rain there in several weeks, and that was one of the driest parts of the state. So that's a good sign, or some good news, more than 2 inches in some cases, but much of the state total rainfall was 1/4 to 1/2 inch or less. In some cases, it was less than a 1/4 inch. So again, we fell further behind, and the impacts to this are, in many cases, have intensified dryness or the lack of water. This is the Quick Drought Response Index from the National Drought Mitigation Center out in Nebraska. And what I've got here are basically a 2-week change. On the left here, you can see conditions as of the 11th of August, while on the right, we've got the same index here for last week, or the 25th actually, so earlier this week. And if you can't see the color and so forth, what it generally indicates is that in much of the state, we see more browns here. We've seen the landscape dry out. This is a combination of both remotely sensed data from satellite as well as ground truth, but there was more blue and that indicates sufficient moisture for the landscape, but there's a lot more brown, especially as you go across the northern part of the state. Also an area of south central into east central lower Michigan, where we have seen an intensification of the dryness, and so that probably will be reflected in this week's drought monitor, which comes out a little bit later here today. We will see again, an increase of dryness across many parts of the state. Looking ahead here, it's a very straightforward forecast. We have a general continuation of the pattern that we've been in, and that again is a northwesterly flow aloft across much of the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. These are conditions here, our surface map right now, and what we're going to see is the passage of at least 2, possibly 3 frontal boundaries across the state over the next week, and those will represent our chances for precipitation. One of those is going to come later today, beginning actually by midday. We'll see showers and thunderstorms develop here across western and central portions of upper Michigan and spread south and eastward during the course of the day into the afternoon and the evening. And we will see, well, certainly I think fairly numerous coverage of the showers and thunderstorms, but there's not a whole lot of moisture with these for these storms to work with. So even in areas that do get rainfall, and there will be some thunderstorms embedded here, so lightning and thunder definitely a possibility. Rainfall totals will be generally on the light side, 1/4 of an inch or less. And again, where dryness has been a problem, that's not, well, we'd like to see a little bit more. I would also note too, especially across the southern, let's call it the southeastern third or so of the lower peninsula, and let's include part of central lower in this as well. Due to the passage of this frontal boundary here coming late in the day when conditions are most unstable and give us some wind aloft, there's a possibility that some of these storms could be on the strong side. The primary threats would be strong winds, but there's also possibility of some hail, maybe even a tornado. But I think that would be isolated. But don't be surprised, again, in a couple places, that would be the exception rather than the rule, but that is certainly a possibility. This front, though, will move quickly across the state and be, by the early morning hours, will be across the southeastern part of the state. Here are conditions as of 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You can see that the frontal boundary has cleared Michigan and moving off to our south and east. It'll actually stall down there. And then high pressure, another Canadian origin high pressure air mass. That's why we've seen all the cooler than normal weather the last week. Yet another one moves in and brings us tomorrow. Friday will be a beautiful day across most of the state, sunny. And as Phil brought out in his intro here for the big game at Spartan Stadium on Friday evening at 7, just gorgeous, almost perfect conditions, but more like early fall than late summer. Sometimes that first football game in summer really can be hot and uncomfortable. That will not be the case tomorrow. High temperatures tomorrow over most of the state, generally in the low and mid 70s. At game time tomorrow night, we'll probably see the temperature falling through down into the lower 60s. So probably need a sweatshirt or jacket by the end of the day. Low temperatures here over the next several days will continue below normal, generally in the 40s and 50s as we move into the weekend. High temperatures generally in the 70s, some 60s far north. We will see some moderation by next week, moving towards the early part of next week, possibly up to 80 once again, but generally in the highs only in the 70s. Here's our forecast for Saturday, and you can see that the front that moves through here today stalls out over the Ohio Valley, and there will be a next weather system, an upper air system that comes along, passes over this, and causes at least the chance for some showers, primarily across the southern half of the lower peninsula. That will be during the day on Saturday into early Saturday evening. And northern parts of the state, I think, will be dry and cool with some easterly winds around this high pressure, around the back edge of the high pressure system. But the farther south in the state you go, the higher the chances for precip. We could see some 1/4 inch totals here in the southern tier or 2 of counties. But once again, we're not looking for any heavy rainfall really this upcoming week. It will be generally on the light side. And that's reflected here in our precip forecast for the next week. Accumulated totals over the whole time range from over 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in far northern parts of the state up in the upper peninsula, maybe across the southwestern corner of the state. Some of that would be here later today, but most of the state, once again, 1/4 to 1/2 an inch or less, in some cases even less than that. And given the dryness, that is that dryness, or those areas that have been impacted by dryness, there's a good chance that they will persist at least another week or maybe longer than that. And we move into medium range forecast guidance, more of the same. The jet stream pattern here indicated for the first week of September is consistent, and it calls once again for ridging out over the western part of North America, troughing over the east, and then that leaves northwesterly flow over the Great Lakes region, including Michigan. And for that reason, we have below normal mean temperatures indicated. You can see that in the forecast here for this time frame. And this is also almost the same or similar forecast, at least for the 8 to 14 day time frame, which takes us out into the second week of September. You'll note here that it does also call for above normal precipitation totals, and we've had this issue. It sounds like a broken record. At least 2 of the last briefings here. If I would have made this forecast, I would have not put above normal precipitation totals. This is the official NOAA Climate Prediction Center outlook. I would have probably put normal at best, but some areas, unfortunately, I think, again, for those areas that are dry, probably we'll see even a continuation of drier than normal conditions. The number of chances we have for precipitation in this type of pattern just are not as high as they can be or could be. And I really personally think normal to below would have probably been a safer bet, at least for the next week, maybe 10 days or so. Now, the big question is, especially given the delays in planting and delayed crop progress here, how long does this pattern end? And that's what I'm addressing here. I've put on here, this is something I haven't used very much, but it's a week 3 to 4 outlook. So it's sort of in between the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day time frame, that medium range, and then the long lead, which brings us out to a month. This is a new product from CPC for the 7th through the 20th. This comes out every Friday afternoon, this product, and this is the current one that we have from last Friday, but I wanted to show this because I think it does give us a hint as to how long this pattern lasts. Up in the upper left here, I've got, and this is actually more current than that last Friday. This is actually from earlier this morning, but this is the jet stream pattern, the 5-day mean for the end of the second week of September, going out through the 14th. And what you can see here with this upper arrow, if you can't see, what it does suggest is that we have the formation of a troughing feature out over western North America, and that builds a broad ridge across the middle of the U.S. That would be certainly put an end to our cooler than normal temperatures. I think a fairly good likelihood of that, and there's a reflection of that in this 3 to 4 week outlook here, with warmer than normal temperatures developing over much of the eastern and even in parts of the Midwest, including portions of Michigan. It moves the cooler than normal temperatures out into farther west, out into the high plains and even into the Rockies. It also suggests here for the same time frame below normal precipitation totals. And so I think that that's where the numerical forecast guidance is pushing us in that direction. So again, the best guess right now, how long does this sort of cool early fall pattern last? Probably a change during the end of the second week of September. That's at least the way it looks right now. So summarizing, more of the same, cool, and we'll call it a little bit unsettled pattern with a number of frontal passages here. But even though we precip likely here later today across the state, Saturday across the southern part of the state, and again the next chance after that probably coming late on Labor Day. And by the way, for most of the state, Labor Day, the holiday here, Monday, looks really nice with fair and a little bit warmer conditions, but there will be increasing clouds late in the day and overnight, and we could see the chance for rain as early as Monday night in the far northwestern part of the state, spreading over the rest of the state on the day Tuesday. Not looking like a huge rainfall producer. That's the other, I think one of the other summary take-homes here is that even though when we do have rain, it probably will be on the light side. Our temperatures will remain a few degrees below normal, with highs generally in the 60s north and 70s south, and lows in the 40s and 50s. And again, that's below where we should be for the end of August, early September. That weather continues on into at least the first week of September, as indicated by the medium range forecast guidance, but possibly a change coming the second week of September. That's at least that's what the guidance is suggesting right now. And as I wrap things up here, a couple of reminders. One is delayed planting resource page here, and you can see the URL down below for a number of different products that address our challenging growing season this year, and from a number of different aspects. That you can find that here. And as Phil also mentioned at the beginning here, just a reminder, please, if you can, take a chance to evaluate the series here and help us to make it better. The evaluation survey is found at the URL you've got right here down below. And with that, I'll wrap things up and thank you for attention and see if there might be any questions.
Jeff, I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I do have a question about the hurricane. You don't see any effect coming into the Midwest from the hurricane?
Thank you for reminding me about this. Well, I did look at the guidance, and it's way out there right now. And this is if you have interest in Florida, this is something you're going to want to definitely pay close attention to. There have been some challenges for the forecasters. If you've been watching this, the intensity of the hurricane, at least its forecast, is significantly greater now than it was just 24 or 48 hours ago. There's a couple reasons for that. It didn't interact with land as had been previously expected, but this is a definite threat, mainly for Florida. But there's enough uncertainty with this that anybody in the southeastern U.S. should really be paying attention, but especially across Florida, because it probably will be a major hurricane before it makes landfall. Right now, the best guess for that would probably be next Monday. Beyond that, there is a hint that the remnants of Hurricane Dorian would make it into at least the southeastern U.S. One of the forecast models, the medium range that we use to put together the medium range, actually has some of the remnants maybe making it as far as the Ohio Valley. But that's a long way off. A lot could change. And I think statistically and looking at where this thing is, that's not typically for any of these post-landfall tropical cyclones, hurricanes, tropical storms. That's typically for Michigan, not where we have any impacts. To do that here, typically you're looking at a Gulf of Mexico, especially the Texas, Louisiana coast area is where we're more likely to see any, if any, impact at all. And typically we don't. So right now, I would say the odds are not in favor of that. If anything, it might make it up into the Ohio Valley by the middle of next week, but that would be a big, big if. And so something to keep in track of and certainly watch, especially if you do have family or interest in the Southeast. Before all said and done, it certainly has the potential to be a major problem especially for Florida. But right now, I think it's a stretch to see any impact, at least here in Michigan.
Thank you, Jeff. With that, I think we'll say thank you, everyone, for attending the virtual breakfast this morning, and have a terrific day.